The gravel popped beneath my tires as I slowed to a stop. I'd been imagining solitude since the day I signed for the place, a remote log cabin, a battered outbuilding, and 2 acres tucked just beyond the reach of the city. But instead of peace, I found a folding table blocking the narrow access road.
Property, right?
2 people in orange safety vests stood behind it. One was a graying woman wearing a laminated badge that read, "WA Security Volunteer." She stepped toward my truck with a smile that looked friendly until she spoke. "Can I help you?" The man beside her crossed his arms. Behind them stood an oversized sign. "Private, WA members only." I rolled down my window. "Morning. I own the cabin at the ridge." I held up a copy of my deed. She didn't even look at it. "We manage this private land," she said. "This is WA property. Nobody gets through without board approval." I stared at her. "I have legal access." Her smile disappeared. "If you don't leave right now, we'll involve law enforcement." The man beside her reached for his phone. I didn't argue. I simply looked at the road, then back at them. "We'll see." That was the beginning. But what they didn't know was that I had specifically bought this property because I wanted nothing to do with an HOA. My father used to tell me, if you want peace, start by owning something nobody else can lay claim to. So I took that advice seriously. For months, I searched for a cabin with 3 things: no WA, independent access, and a clean title. I went through plat maps, old surveys, property tax records and previous ownership documents. I walked the land with a surveyor and checked every boundary marker. Before closing, I made the title company verify everything: no liens, no hidden encumbrances, no strange annexations. I wasn't guessing where my property ended. I knew. That's why the HOA's confidence didn't scare me. 3 days after that first confrontation, a certified letter arrived. The return address read, "President, Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." Inside was a formal legal threat signed by Alan Warren, a retired attorney who apparently carried considerable weight around the neighborhood. The letter claimed that access to the subdivision was restricted to dues-paying members and approved guests. According to Warren, I wasn't an WA member. Therefore, my use of the road was supposedly trespassing. They demanded that I immediately stop using it. Otherwise, they threatened county authorities and possible legal action. I read the letter twice. Then I put it aside. Because intimidation only works when the other person doesn't know the facts. And I knew mine. Still, they escalated. One morning, I found a fluorescent orange sticker slapped across my truck windshield. "Parking in violation of WA rules. Fine to be assessed." Then came another letter. Then another. One was labeled "Final Cease and Desist." Another threatened daily fines for unauthorized access. Then a neighbor quietly pulled his truck beside mine near the post office. "They told me not to talk to you," he whispered. He said they were telling people I was causing trouble. I realized what they were doing. They weren't proving ownership. They were creating pressure. So I did the opposite. I stayed quiet. Every sticker was photographed. Every letter was preserved. Every conversation I could legally record was documented. I even kept ordinary receipts with timestamps, creating a record of when I was on my own property. For every threat they sent, I created another piece of evidence. They were building noise. I was building a file. And then curiosity took me to the county records office. The archive room smelled of old paper and floor wax. Metal drawers held plat maps that were older than many of the HOA's members. I pulled one out, and there it was, my property. A narrow rectangle sitting at the far edge of the survey. It had never been annexed into Whispering Pines. Then I followed the access road backward through decades of records. That's when I found something even more important. The road's easement had been recorded nearly a century earlier, long before the subdivision even existed. The cabin itself had once been used as a winter shelter by a logging crew, and its access rights had been preserved in old property records. I had certified copies made. But there was still one question. How had the WA convinced itself that my property was theirs? I found the answer in a thick binder of County Planning Board minutes. Years earlier, Whispering Pines had expanded. The WA had attempted to bring several additional parcels into the subdivision. But one parcel had been excluded because of a clerical delay. I checked the parcel number. It was mine. I drove straight to the county clerk's office with my deed under my arm. The clerk listened as I explained the chain of ownership. Then she pulled out several heavy plat books. About 10 minutes later, she returned with a single document. She looked at me and said, "There's no annexation for your lot." Then she stamped the page. "Your property isn't, and never was, part of the HOA." I took the certified statement and walked back to my truck. I didn't feel angry. I felt relieved. Because the entire dispute had just changed. The HOA had been acting like it owned something it couldn't legally claim. Now I had proof. Still, I wasn't going to fight them myself. I hired a real estate attorney. He was the old school type, methodical, patient, and completely uninterested in drama. We spread everything across his desk. The original deed, historic plat maps, the century-old easement, the county clerk's certified statement, and every threatening letter the HOA had sent me. Then he drafted a notice. It was short and precise. Stop the harassment. Retract the threats. Recognize the property's actual boundaries. And if they refused, we would seek a declaratory judgment and pursue damages, legal fees, and a public correction. The letter went out by certified mail. A response came from Alan Warren. The confidence was still there. Barely. We believe our position is correct and are prepared to defend the association's rights in court. My attorney sent one more letter. We will be seeking a declaratory judgment. Any further misrepresentation will be presented as evidence of malice. That changed everything. The HOA's responses slowed. Their tone softened. And then came the next board meeting. It was more crowded than usual. Rumors of a lawsuit had spread through Whispering Pines. I walked in with my attorney and a folder under my arm. Alan Warren sat at the head of the table. He looked confident. But every few seconds, his eyes moved toward us. Routine business dragged on first. Water meters, budget discussions, even an argument over paint colors. Then finally, my case came up. The complaint was simple. Alleged trespassing and unauthorized property use. My attorney stood. He placed a stack of documents on the table. Historic plat maps, certified county records, my deed, the easement, and every threatening letter I had received. Then he read directly from the county's certified statement. My parcel was explicitly excluded from the HOA, and my access road was recognized as a lawful easement dating back generations. Then came the part they couldn't explain away. My attorney played the recording from the gate. The security volunteers' voices filled the room. They were heard telling me I couldn't enter my own property. They were heard threatening to involve law enforcement. Suddenly, the room was silent. Alan tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding. Then he called it a paperwork mix-up. But the documents were right there. The signatures were there. The county records were there. And the law didn't care how confident the HOA had sounded at that gate. The homeowners began murmuring. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked angry. Then the board went completely silent. There was no argument left. No clever loophole. No threatening letter that could erase a century-old easement. The outcome was unavoidable. The HOA issued a public apology. All threats and proposed fines were officially retracted. A written correction was filed and posted on the community notice boards. The same organization that had told me I wasn't allowed to use the road was now publicly acknowledging that the road was legally mine to access. And I never had to raise my voice once. A few days later, I put up a small sign at the entrance to my driveway. Nothing dramatic. Just, private property, not subject to HOA. It didn't need to shout. People understood. Neighbors who had once avoided me started stopping to talk. Some quietly asked how I'd handled the situation. The answer was simple. I didn't beat them by being louder. I beat them by being patient enough to find the facts they never bothered to check. Not long afterward, Alan Warren's name disappeared from the board election flyers. A quieter president took his place. And I went back to doing what I had wanted from the beginning. Stacking wood, repairing the porch, watching the sun disappear behind the ridge. Because real property isn't only about owning land. Sometimes it's about protecting the peace that ownership was supposed to give you. The HOA had assumed that authority came from a badge, a letterhead, and enough confidence to intimidate someone. But authority without documentation is just noise. Land records don't care who speaks the loudest. And neither does the law. This time, the HOA picked the wrong property owner to cross. But every forested lane, every private driveway, and every quiet corner of the country has its own buried disputes and forgotten boundaries. You never know where the next conflict will begin, or who will finally decide to stand their ground. As I locked the cabin that evening, deed in hand, the last sunlight flickered through the pines. I looked back at the road. It was quiet again, exactly the way I'd wanted it from the beginning. And I knew one thing for certain. This probably wouldn't be the last time someone tried to push their authority a little too far. But next time, I'd be ready.